talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and with Holly Blades. And I'm just going to nip myself. Yes, we are live after having a full weekend off, more or less, with pre-recorded shows. We are live tonight. So those people in the chat, get your points across to the subjects that Holly and I are going to discuss tonight. Did you have a good weekend, Holly?
Yeah, it was really, really good. How was yours?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Managed to catch some of the football as well. And the Ballfest, of course, against Scotland, which we saw together with your dad, which was absolutely horrendous, really, for an international football game. But look, it's been interesting. We'll see what happens with England in their final game. And be nice to see them join Wales in the final stages of the competition. But as always, we took a few... conversation starters around and let the chat join in. So what do you want to talk about first tonight, Holly?
I think first we'll get the boring England-Scotland game out the way, because I don't think anyone wants to dwell on that too much. Pretty boring game. Obviously, I know we watched it together at your event with my dad and stuff was there. 0-0. I don't think anyone expected that result. I think people was expecting some more goals in that game. And I think the problem with it was the fact that it was hyped up so much and for so long. And then for it to be a 0-0, it felt like a massive letdown. So what did you make of the game overall?
I mean, 0-0 says it all, doesn't it? And I think if you watch the Three Amigos and Keith Patterson talking on the Fab Four show at the weekend beforehand, we were all expecting 2-3, 4-0, and it just didn't happen. It was a bit of a damp squib, and I think a lot of it's probably down to the best coach in the UK, John Carver, who looks very happy there with the result. But look, it wasn't a feast of football. Both teams cancelled each other out. I thought England were fairly negative, and Harry Kane clearly has more on his mind than the Euros. I think Harry Kane's mind is on one thing and one thing only, and that's where he's going to be plying his trade next season. Is he going to stay in the Premier League and sign for a team like Man City, or is he going to take that jump that the likes of Mark Hughes and Gary Lineker did, and many more before him, and that's head to pastures new abroad and maybe sign for one of the big teams, maybe go to a Real Madrid or a PSG or a Barcelona. Is he going to make that kind of move? And it's quite clear that something's not right with Harry Kane. He couldn't have picked a worse time to go on a goal drought in international level. Now, if England, continue in the competition, which we all hope they do, maybe you'll find he's scoring boots in the next stages. But it doesn't look right, Holly, to me. There's something not working, and I don't know whether that's the system or I don't know whether that's something mentally with Harry Kane. What do you think?
For me, Steve, I have to agree with you. I think his head's not in this tournament. I think his head's elsewhere. He's thinking about where he wants to move next, which I'm surprised at with Harry Kane, because he often gets praised a lot for how professional he is. And you'd think in this situation, he'd be able to put that all to one side, focus on the England games and do his best. But he's not being able to do that, unfortunately. And he just doesn't look like half the player he was. He looks totally lost. He's been playing so deep. It's just very, very bizarre, to be honest. He's even more poorer than you'd expect him to be when he was having an off day. He just looks completely like a different player. And I think, to be honest, if he is looking for a new club, he's certainly not selling himself well. I think that's what he's got to keep in mind, because you'd be looking at him, maybe if you haven't watched much of Harry Kane in this competition, you'd be thinking, why on earth would we sign him? He looks nothing like a forward. And yet again, highlighting that problem of the fact that England are pretty heavily reliant on Harry Kane for goals. We don't really have any other half-decent strikers. Of course, there's Calvert-Lewin, who, to be honest, I'd be wanting to step up. And if I was Gareth Southgate, I'd be dropping Harry Kane, because he really doesn't deserve to play. And he can't keep playing like this. Otherwise, we will end up getting knocked out of the competition sooner rather than later.
I think it was the one thing I pointed to when we did a show a couple of weeks back before the Euros started, that when the squad was announced, essentially we decided to go with three strikers, and of course that means there's less option, to change things around. And if somebody gets injured or somebody gets sent off or whatever, and we're going to have a bit of a crisis on. But I think there's been too much reliance maybe he's put on Harry Kane. Maybe he feels a bit of pressure, Holly.
Yeah, you could argue that. I don't think it's a valid excuse, because you could argue that he's had pressure on him for a long time in the World Cup and also at Spurs, because he is their main man as well. I just do think it's a case of worrying about where he's going to be playing next, because he's so desperate to leave Tottenham. But yeah, there will be some pressure there, guaranteed, of course, because he is who Gareth Southgate's relying on for that forward pressure, and he's just not stepping up to the mark, and therefore we aren't really scoring.
Yeah, I know Les, I think I saw him on Twitter. Was it Les Bates? He went, watch the English fall apart because they didn't beat Scotland. And I think he also put a tweet to both of us saying, after you put your bit out about the woeful performance, Scotland deserve a bit of praise. Well, maybe they do, because, they didn't get off to the greatest of starts. They had a bang average game, which led to a defeat. And then, they come into England game expecting, the public and the bookies certainly expecting them to be thrashed. But, they had a bit of resilience about them, and they were delighted with getting off the mark with a point and not conceding a goal. So I suppose it's all to play for going into the last round of group games.
It is. Listen, I mean, I'd love to see Scotland go through the group stages. I never have been anti-Scotland, but of course I was speaking about it from an England point of view. Whereas, say if it was Newcastle, I wouldn't be praising the other side if we played horrendously. That's just the way it is, So I was only thinking about from England's point of view. But yeah, Scotland did play well. Of course, they didn't start off very well against Czech Republic. Definitely stepped up in that game. And I think you could tell they wanted it more. England sat back a little bit. I think they were almost frightened by the amount of pressure that was put on them from Scotland. They weren't expecting it. I don't think Gareth Southgate probably would have prepared them enough, because no one would have expected Scotland to turn up in the way in which they did. So yeah, they did really well. Hoping they get some points out of Croatia and they can qualify, because it'd be great to play them again at some stage if we both make it through. But ultimately, from England's point of view, it was poor.
Tim's comment on the screen there. Good evening, mate. He says Grealish was woefully passed the ball to a substitution that was warming up, and also to several Scottish players. Must have been watching John Joe. Tom Lynch says, I was amused by England fans loving it, but also at Scots celebrating a draw a bit too much. Scotland had huge chances to win, but couldn't take them against a poor England side, which is about right. Stu says, Man City offered £100 million for Kane. I've not seen that, but probably a good starting point. I can imagine Spurs probably wanting a little bit more. Jeff says, it was like watching Bruce Ball, aimlessly swapping sides with no idea why. Bede says Southgate got it wrong by playing two defensive midfielders. We needed to drop one out and bring a Grealish in. Yeah, Grealish seems to be causing a big debate amongst England fans. I mean, he's a maverick. He's the kind of player that we all expect to come on and change the game. But maybe he's a better player to start rather than bringing him on as a sub.
Yeah, I would definitely be starting Grealish, and that's from the first game. I wasn't surprised when Southgate didn't start him, because I don't think Grealish is one of Southgate's favourite players, and I know Gareth Southgate has a certain selection of players that he will start regardless of how poorly they're playing, which I think is the case with most managers. They have their favourites. But Jack Grealish, he's come on twice as a sub, both times. I don't think he's impressed at all. But then again, the whole side was poor against Scotland, so it was quite harsh to judge him off that. It would be interesting to see him start a game. I know everyone was saying start him ahead of Sterling. Then Sterling did actually score the winning goal when we played Croatia, so I can understand why he kept Sterling in the side. But maybe at some point he's going to have to give him a chance, because currently the side's just not working the way we want it to. Would you be starting Grealish?
I would start Grealish, yeah. I mean, he's a very talented player, but the problem is, I just think Southgate got this wrong from the start. I think he's messing around too much. I think the fact that he didn't play what was going to be starting 11 in the final friendly, I just think there's been too much, pandering to egos or pandering to people who are big and make a big impression in the dressing room, and who got good influence on the squad, but. For me, it should be a best team. It should be the best team, Lots of opinions coming in on this. Les says maybe it's just because England are not as good as what you think. Every tournament, it's the same. Won it before it's even played. Not sure what everyone was expecting from a bunch of spoiled kids and a manager with no balls, says Ryan Sweeney. Straight to the point as usual, Ryan. And Jeff says, I'm not sure all this cutting in from the wing suits Kane's game. Probably agree with that. It's all about tactics and formations, what you're used to. Mark Cooper, though, says, well, Southgate says he's playing Kane tomorrow. He needs dropped. And I mean, yeah, that did strike me as a little bit surprised, to hear Southgate come out and say that, Kane will be starting again. I mean, it is his captain. Alan Shearer seems to agree with that, but do you? I mean, this isn't 38 games in a Premier League season. This is tournament football where we need to be getting goals.
I don't agree with it at all. Yes, managers have loyalty to players so far, especially when it's a captain, and they want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But unfortunately, he's had 2 goals now, and both times he's been not even a little bit off. He's been absolutely abysmal, I think it's fair to say. He hasn't done anything that you'd expect a striker to do. And in my opinion, he's a waste of a player on the pitch currently. He needs to have a bit of time, think about, try and get in the right zone, think about what's going on in his head. Obviously, if he is worried about this transfer, and try and put that to one side and just sort himself out a little bit. Because it is fast-paced, so he will be struggling to kind of, regather his thoughts before the next game starts. But you've got to remember, say, for example, if it was Newcastle who were in the Europa League or whatever, and there was one striker, even if it was Shearer, and we all love Shearer, that wasn't playing to his ability, and we had someone else that could potentially do a better job than Shearer, we'd all be calling for him to be dropped to the bench eventually, because sticking loyal to your striker or your captain, it isn't going to get you through the tournament, unfortunately.
Yeah, Ryan Sweeney says, I've seen more confident bin cleaners than Harry Kane. Too much money has corrupted these players. Mark says he would drop Rice, Sterling and Kane and bring in Grealish, Sancho and Calvert-Lewin. Agreeing with what you were saying about Calvert-Lewin. Bede says, Southgate sets England up too defensively. We pass the ball back, sideways and backwards far too many times. Julie says, Mount and Chilwell having to self-isolate as we were pictured with COVID positive. Billy Gilmore after the game could miss the game tomorrow. Didn't know that. So thanks for that update, Julie. Hope your internet feeds a little bit better. I did see somebody asking about the cat case. We'll keep that until Keith's on later this week, because I think there is going to be developments. It seems certainly it's hotting up in the papers, and it doesn't look as if it's all down to people trying to get clickbait. But if there's anything to come from the takeover, Tuesday night and Friday night will be the shows to watch. Obviously, Liam will be on tomorrow. I've seen more than 20 players linked with Newcastle this weekend, and I'm sure Liam will have an answer to most of them for us tomorrow night, live at 6 o'clock. The Fab Four will be pre-record again this week. Daz was going to come on and present it for us, but there's so much to do and so much to cover with regards to takeover, cat case, this, that and the other, that I'm going to do it, but it'll be a pre-record for this week as well, because I've got my second premiere of the Craze documentary, but this time in London on Friday night. So all the shows still going on. You'll still have 7 shows this week, but will have to be a pre-record for Friday. Okay, I want to talk, Holly, a little bit about this, and it is Hartlepool coming back into the Football League. Well done to the Poolies. Really, really good game yesterday. And I think probably the highlight for me, apart from the penalty shootout, of course, was this. And that was Coverland, the Torquay goalkeeper, scoring the equaliser. Hartlepool were 1-up, cruising, looking as if they were going to go up without any extra time. Coverland went up the other end. Bang! 2 goalkeepers scoring in the same season. Obviously, that one was a non-league game, non-league playoff game. But it was great. And I enjoy watching non-league football, as most viewers know. I do tend to follow Dunstan, occasionally Gateshead. But great to see Hartlepool just back in the league, Holly. And it's not easy to do.
No, it's not. I wasn't watching the game, but I was keeping an eye on the scores. And when they equalised in the 5 minutes of injury time or whatever, I was like, oh, that's so unlucky. I was thinking it's going to be a difficult job for them now. And then they won 5-4 on pens, which was really, really brilliant. And it's great for local non-league sides to be doing well, because it brings more money into the region. It gets more fans into the stadiums, which is all absolutely great. And I've seen stories today that Newcastle are going to be strengthening their links with Hartlepool, which is again something fantastic, because I think that's important for Newcastle to do, with the youth, because we've been struggling in that department for a long time. And if we can build relations with local non-league sides, then that can only be a positive thing. But congratulations to Hartlepool. Great to see them back in the league. I think they definitely deserve it, and hopefully they go on to do even better things next season.
Do you get along to watch any non-league, or have you watched any non-league, Holly?
So I check scores quite often of a few sides. I follow Blue Star quite often, Dunstan, Gateshead, Blythe Spartans to a certain degree, but I've never actually been to a game. It is something that I'm planning on doing more often, but I don't actually live very, very close to a non-league ground, so they're a bit awkward to get to sometimes. But I'm hoping, if I get a car and stuff, then I'll be able to go to more non-league football. That's something I'd really love to do, but I'm not committed on a team yet, because there's a few that my family follow different ones and stuff, and I'm I don't know which one I want to follow, so I'll have to think.
Who does the family follow then?
Well, there's a few people that follow Blue Star, and then there's a few people that follow Dunstan as well, and then some that follow Dunstan and Gateshead. I know one of my family members goes to quite a few Gateshead games, so there's a few teams really.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's just a break from the monotony sometimes of being a Newcastle fan under the Mike Ashley era. It's certainly given me some fantastic days and a few cup finals as well following Dunstan. But yeah, I think the brilliant thing about North East fans is that when Gateshead had that run in the playoffs and they were trying to get back into league football, the home game down at the stadium was full of Newcastle and Sunderland fans who were giving their back in the Gateshead once the season had finished. So North East fans in general do tend to get back behind their local non-league teams, which is great.
Yeah, it is. It's something that I really like, non-league football. I think it's a nice break as well, especially when Newcastle's doing bad in the league, and it's quite a nice little distraction to watch another team. So definitely in the future, I'm hoping I can get to some non-league football.
Good stuff. Okay, well, people in the chat, tell us who you think Holly should go and support non-league wise. We'll not hold you to it, but just out of interest, who do you think she should go and watch? Okay, Holly, your next topic.
So my next topic, I think I'll go for the Rafa Benitez story. It's been a bit hit and miss. I know at first it was Rafa's definitely nailed on to go to Everton. Then it was it's looking uncertain, and now apparently it's off altogether. So it's been a bit of a crazy week in terms of that story, but we'll start with how it initially came about when it was definitely going ahead. Did that give you any less confidence for the takeover? Because I know some people were quite concerned by that. I wasn't personally, but were you?
To be honest, the first person I was going to ring was going to be, connected to Rafa. So, that's what I did. And the message I got was loud and clear that it's close. From their perspective, they were in talks with Everton and they were close. That was it. Those are the words that I gave to people watching NUFC Matters last week. And I've got to be honest, I was gutted to hear that, because I am still convinced that the takeover goes through at Newcastle and Rafa comes back as the manager. That is still my feeling, and that is my thoughts. I know how much Rafa would love to come back to Newcastle. I know how much Rafa did not want to leave Newcastle. So, from my perspective, to see Rafa Benitez go to Everton would have been a travesty and would have been a huge disappointment. Do I think it would have put an end to the takeover? No, because obviously from our perspective, it's still ongoing. There is 2 legal cases in full flow, and we know that there will be some kind of resolution or some kind of resolve. But from my perspective, you've got to look at it and say it would have been disappointing if he'd gone there. I know he's not everyone's cup of favorite cup of tea. He's not everyone's favorite manager, and from a Newcastle fan, who a lot of people like to see. How can I say, positive attacking football? Rafa was quite defensive, but I just enjoyed watching, Rafa put teams to bed, put teams to the sword. And I think anyone who watched Rafa in that final season and those remaining games, we certainly weren't defensive, but we went down to Fulham and hammered them at their place. When we all went down on boats on the on the canal kind of thing. It was, for me, Rafa literally had to work as a manager with the handcuffs on. and didn't have a great budget, and had to wheel and deal. Some of the players he brought in were great. Some of the players he brought in weren't so great. But I'd love to see Rafa Benitez here with an opportunity to spend, a ridiculous amount of money and be given the opportunity to try and build something from the bottom up. And the fact that Rafa was, set me a task when he was here of going off and speaking to the local boys clubs like Wallsend and Redhoof Boys, to name a couple. And the idea being that he was going to, start at the bottom and work his way up and integrate Northeast boys teams with Newcastle United tells you all you need to know. It's what Sir Matt Busby did at Manchester United. It's what Bill Shankly did at Liverpool. It's not rocket science, but that's what Rafa wanted to do here. And if he got the opportunity to come back and restart the project, as he called it when he first came here, then I'd be more than happy. It's one of them. But yeah, I would have been disappointed if he'd gone to Everton. What about you?
Yeah, I found the Everton story quite bizarre. I think that's the most I've ever criticised Rafa Benitez, because I'm always very, very praising of him. I love Rafa Benitez. Still would be my number one choice as a manager. But I just thought the Rafa links with Everton, it just felt very, very strange to me. I was concerned that the longer this takeover went on for, he'd be less likely to come to the club, because we all know how desperate he'll be to get back into management. I don't think he's a guy that likes kind of sitting about at home doing nothing sort of thing. And he loves his job, he loves football, so he'd definitely be wanting to get back into that sooner rather than later. But for Everton, I just thought it was a very strange choice of club. We all know how highly he thought of Liverpool, and even at Newcastle, we could see that he still had a very, very strong connection with Liverpool. And the last club I thought he would have went to would have been Everton. Rafa is a man in my mind that's always very, very loyal, and he's a man of principle and stuff. And I just felt like that move to Everton, I can understand why he do it, but I felt like it went against a lot of the principles that Rafa has as a manager and would ruin a little bit of his credibility. But of course, I'd still be very grateful for all the memories at Newcastle and things, but that didn't sit very well with me, that move to Everton. I'm very grateful now that it's back off, so it seems, because I don't think many people want to see him go to Everton. And of course, we've seen the uproar from the Everton fans, which I think would have been expected by Rafa Benitez and basically everyone apart from the owners, who clearly seem quite blind to it, and they didn't react well whatsoever. But you wouldn't expect that. It was similar when Steve Bruce came here because of his connections with Sunderland. It's never a good appointment, especially with the history and the success that he had with Liverpool, because he won trophies there. So I don't think it would have been a good appointment whatsoever. I mean, do you think that would have been a good appointment for Rafa to go to Everton?
I couldn't see it, even though I had the affirmation from somebody close to him that it was close. I really found it strange that he would even be linked with Everton because of his connections to Liverpool, and that in itself is enough reason for him never to go there. What's the pros of him going to Everton? Well, he lives in the Wirral, so it's easy for him to get to. He wants to be close to his family, which he said on more than one occasion. But you knew that Everton fans wouldn't be happy about the situation, and it's proved to be the case. I think the other thing with Everton is that he's not anyone going there is going to be, under the microscope straight away by the current owner. I think that's 5 managers that Everton have had in 5 years, which tells you that they're not prepared to give anybody time to settle in and do the job. And I think he'd be on a hiding to nothing. It's not as if he's somebody who swerves that kind of job, because he went to Chelsea and he wasn't liked at Chelsea, and the criticism was there from the start, and he was up against it from the start because of his connection with Liverpool. And he came to Newcastle knowing fine well that Mike Ashley was a difficult owner to work for, so he likes a challenge. But at the same time, I think that would have been a challenge too much for him, However, it's not all over. I haven't had any more indication, and I've got to be perfectly honest, I haven't had to ask. But, looking at the media reports and looking at what the fans have put out there, I would say he must be dropping down the odds rather dramatically, and I would imagine it'll be somebody else who was appointed, in due course. But I'm glad, as you say, that it's not looking likely that Rafa will go there. I just hope that our takeover goes through quick and he doesn't have this, opportunity come up from another club, Holly, because that would be the worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on. You're going to say something else?
I was just going to say, definitely that's always been in the back of my mind, because we know that Rafa was the number one target for the consortium when they came in. And it's just the longer it went on, I was always concerned that Rafa would take another job because, like I said before, he's a guy that doesn't really like to be out of work. He just loves his football. And I was always keeping an eye on who was sacking their managers and stuff like that, thinking, could Rafa go there? But thankfully he's held off until now. But going to Everton, just like before, I think it would have been another Chelsea situation where from day one he was destined to fail because the fans would have wanted him out before he even got a chance. So I think it's in the best interests of him as well that deal seems to be quieting down a little bit.
Yeah, I think essentially with Rafa, he's got the connection with Amanda Staveley, and Amanda is facilitating the deal. So she will be keen to have, I think, Rafa Benitez there because she's got a good relationship with Rafa and a good connection with Rafa's people. So I would think that Rafa would be in the driving seat. A lot of people, and I've seen it on the chat, not today, but in previous shows, saying that, well, Pochettino was the favourite for the job. He was the favourite for the media, but he wasn't the favourite for the consortium, I don't think. But look, let's hope the takeover goes through sooner rather than later and we can start seriously considering that option. Tom Lynch says, I enjoy going to watch Gateshead or Newcastle Benfield when their games don't clash with Newcastle. Mark Cooper says you should support South Shields. I was at Wembley, went to watch them win the Vase, which was great. Sky Sports have said that Mount Chilwell are self-isolating. Donald says Blue Star. And Jeff, what does Jeff say there? Bring us back to Rafa's attempts to link up with the non-league. Yes, you're right. I just mentioned that earlier. Dave Harrison says, Holly, Newcastle Benfield, and you can call into our archery club, which is next door. Tom says, Dunstan UTS, Holly, you're welcome there. John Justice says, Holly should pick Sunderland as her non-league side. They're not quite non-league yet, John.
Give it a few years.
Give it a few years. Great stuff. Any more suggestions for who Holly should support as a non-league team? Keep them coming in. Big shout out to the sponsors, and it was great to see the sponsors at the documentary premiere the other night. Great to catch up with the lads from Spider VPN who've sponsored us for the last few months for all your internet security. Google Spider VPN, comes up at the top of the search list. They can help protect your passwords and all your stuff on your computer. And to the lads at skipsandbins.com, and only now do I realise that we went to the same school, me and the guy who owned the place, although it was 7 years apart. But it was great to meet the lads from Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Sir Bobby wasn't there, but I'm sure he was there in spirit. And also a big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables and balls at Newcastle, who stayed out the bitter end, it has to be said. So well done, John. And a big shout out to John from Jab Signature, who didn't make it due to some family arrangements, but I'm sure he'll catch up with us in due course. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the Newcastle Legends logo down in the bottom right hand corner. Hit the thumb up to like the video, it does help. Click share to share the button. Click the share button to share the video to your other social media. And drop in the comments and speak to like-minded Newcastle fans. And if you want to get onto our website, it's nufcmatters.com, and you can buy all of our T-shirts on there. Usual programmes this week, me and Liam on Tuesday night, 6 o'clock. No doubt we'll be talking transfers and takeover. Wednesday night is the retro show, again 6 o'clock. This week we're looking at games between Newcastle United and West Bromwich Albion. And then Thursday night it's me, Super Mac and Gibbo chewing the fat over the Euros and Newcastle United. And then on Friday it will be back to the Fab Four. Saturday and Sunday's programmes are looking a little bit different. I think we do have an interview with Bruce Jones, who was Les Battersby in Coronation Street for many years. He was also in the film The Full Monty. I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago about his football allegiances and about his acting career. And if you hadn't had time to catch up with the the one that I did at the weekend. It's well worth a watch. If you're into your gangster films, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels in particular, then it might be worth tuning into the one I did with Vaz Blackwood. He's got some fairly controversial opinions as well, talks a lot about his life as an actor. Well worth a view. Pop onto the playlists and just look for Vaz Blackwood. And as I say, plenty coming up over the next 7 days. Okay, Holly, I'm going to go with this one. Lejeune, back in the news today. Looks as if Newcastle are going to get rid of him. Is that disappointing for you? Because for me, unless the takeover goes through, I don't know. I mean, for me, he was a really good centre half, and I know we're spoiled for choice in that area. But you know, it's down to a financial decision in one sense, because you're into the last year of your career. He can go on a free when his contract's up, or you know, does he get a chance under Bruce next season if the takeover's still dragging on? What's your thoughts on Lejeune?
It's very disappointing for me that he looks to be leaving the club. Obviously, I'm speaking from a perspective of if we're still under Mike Ashley and Bruce next season, because I think that's the way we've got a plan in our minds, because obviously we don't know what's happening in takeover stuff at the moment. But Lejeune, for me, I wasn't happy with the fact that we sent him out on loan in the first place last year, because I think he's definitely got a place in this side. And if he's fully fit, which he has been for the past year, he should be starting, in my opinion, because I think when he's at his best, he's probably, safe to say, if not the best, certainly one of the best centre-backs at the club. And I think he's very, very talented. We've seen the impact he can have in games, like when we were 2-0 down to Everton and he scored 2 goals to equalise us 2-2 in the remaining minutes of extra time or something like that. It was madness. And he certainly can make an impact in that side. I think Steve Bruce has maybe never liked him, because I think even when he was playing well, like at that Everton game, he got dropped quickly after that, and then we didn't see much more of him, and then he went on loan. So I don't think he's one of Bruce's favourites, but I'd certainly be keeping him at the club, even if it's a 1-year extension, because think about it, the club's going to be extending the likes of Andy Carroll's contract by the looks of it, and yet we're getting rid of Lejeune. I know who I'd rather have. Yes, they're in different positions, which I'm fully aware of, but Andy Carroll is nowhere near half the player that Lejeune can be, you know. It's just, I don't understand the club's the decision that the club's making at the moment, but definitely Lejeune should have been staying. I think it's really, really silly to get rid of him, and he's had a great season on loan as well. So would you have kept him?
I would keep him, but again, like you, we're speaking from a perspective that a takeover doesn't go through or is still dragging on, and that is the big concern. You know that. You know, you're getting rid of somebody who I still think could probably do a job, but you know, it's all down to opinions. And I mean, people will point and say, well, the Lascelles will be back fully fit. You know, Fernandez is still there. You know, is Lejeune better than them? But yeah, I mean, I'd be very, very cautious in just letting players go. If the takeover doesn't go through, the takeover may well go through. And you know, from my perspective, I'd rather keep a hold of him for the time being. But you know, it's interesting. It could just be paper talk. You know, obviously he had a decent season. I mean, I know there's also talk about Sorensen saying this is a key year for him this year, and you know, he needs to have a good year under his belt in his last year of his contract. So there's a lot of decisions to be made at Newcastle United. But again, it's I think we're all just standing in limbo, waiting for what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're led to believe we're going to see some kind of action over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So let's hope we do. But yeah, it's an interesting one to see what people think in the chat about that. Tom Lynch has just asked, anyone know what happened with Clarkey? He's left his job in Sudan. Yeah, Lee probably will come on this weekend. I think he might come on Sunday. But he just put his notice in. I'll let him explain why, but let's just say that it wasn't what it said on the tin, I don't think. So he's currently in Dubai trying to get another job. He's keen on staying out there. I think he really did enjoy his time, albeit brief, at Sudan. But from his perspective, yeah, he will be coming on the show and having a chat with us to tell us what had happened. Paul Oxley says, Berkeley Town. I did see your points you made earlier, Paul, and I think I've covered it on this show before. you made some comment about Rafa going to China. His contract was up, and don't forget the story that I told everybody, which eventually became public knowledge from Rafa himself, about 1 year before his contract was up at St James's Park. Mike Ashley invited him all the way down to Sports Direct in London to tell him that he could leave for the Spanish job, the Spain job, when it was up for grabs. And he thought he was going down to talk about the transfer budget. He had no intention in leaving. So if you're in the last year of your contract and you get invited all the way down to London on the expectancy of talking transfers, but in fact you're getting told that you can leave, I'm sure that you're probably thinking, well, there might not be a renewal of contract in the following year, Paul. So I do like to reiterate that, because there is this misconception that Rafa was playing to leave and he wanted to leave. He didn't want to leave. I'll tell you now, 100%, hand on heart, Rafa Benitez did not want to leave Newcastle United. He wanted to stay. And from his perspective, he was very, very, very disappointed about the way that things worked out with Newcastle. And did he go to China? Yes, he did. And I'm sure I would go to China if I was up at £12 million per year. And good luck to him when he did it. Didn't work out, but I'm sure he was paid. But I always feel like I've got to jump to Rafa's defence on that one anyway. Tom Lynch is carrying on a conversation about what Richard Key said about Rafa. And yeah, you're right. Complete argument between those two. There were big disagreements between those two. And that is why he comes out with all that kind of rubbish time and time again. It's awful to see. And somebody who works in the media shouldn't be allowed to be that biased. For me, it's bang out of order. I'm sure a lot of you will agree. Okay, Holly, what was your next point?
So Joe Willock, there's been a lot of different stories about him, whether he's going to stay at Arsenal or come back to Newcastle, which I think most Newcastle fans want. There's now been a story that he may be coming back to Newcastle in exchange for Freddie Woodman plus a little bit of cash. There's a few people that's not happy about that, saying that we should keep Freddie Woodman. From my perspective, I think we have an abundance of talented goalkeepers. I don't think we need Freddie Woodman. Of course, I'd keep him. I wouldn't get rid of him, but he's been out on loan for years now, and we do have enough good goalkeepers. So if that's what it would take to get Joe Willock to the club, I'd be happy to do that. Would you be happy?
Yeah, I mean, Woodman hasn't really come anywhere near first team football because of the abundance of good goalkeepers that we've had between the sticks. And I mean, Dubravka is number one. There's no doubt about that. And from our perspective, to see Darlow come in and play his part like he did last season, I think we were all delighted to see that he was capable, more than capable. We signed Gillespie as well, which I think told us a lot about maybe where we're going with Woodman here, in the sense that Gillespie, is a Geordie lad. He's capable. He's tried and tested. He's somebody who can, could easily fill the gap if needed. I can't see Woodman staying, and I think if he can act as a bit of a financial pawn in the Willock game, then I would take that gamble, because we've got more than enough goalkeepers to see us through next season and beyond probably. So from my perspective, I'd like to see that go through. If it means we can get Willock and they want Woodman, then why not? I think it's a great shout. That's a lot of things like that get done. And maybe it's something that's already been talked out and agreed. But I think it would be great to see Willock back in a black and white shirt, and I think it would give the squad a bit of a boost, Holly.
Yeah, it would. I think especially Alan St-Maximin, because he's been quite vocal about how the club need to be more ambitious and try and add to the squad to make us a better team so that we can go on and challenge. And he was a big fan of Joe Willock. They got on really well during his time at the club, and we want players like that to stay as well. So if Joe Willock came into the side and that convinced some other players to stay, and also it shows that we're progressing as a club because we're trying to improve the side rather than selling on a good player, buying a equally good player or a worse player, which we've done plenty of times. Think about a couple of seasons ago, Emil Kraft and DeAndre Yedlin. I mean, Yedlin's a better player for me, so I think we've done lots of deals like that recently, which just shows the lack of ambition that we have. But that will inspire players, make them more willing to want to stick at Newcastle United if we are showing that interest and that we're trying to get better by bringing in the likes of Joe Willock. And of course, he's a talented youngster as well that I think we're very, very lucky to get if we do get him, because I can imagine that there'll be quite a few clubs that show interest in him at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a great deal of Woodman. And Paul Oxley says Woodman is an average keeper. We build players up in Newcastle, especially some fans, hence Sorensen not pulling up trees after his build-up. But yeah, I haven't seen a great deal of Woodman at all. And, I know that there's a lot of people think he's well worth persevering with. But we have an abundance of goalkeepers. So for him to go wouldn't be too much of a downer for me. And Paul's probably right about Sorensen. I mean, I saw Sorensen play against Sunderland in whatever the Papa John's Trophy was a couple of years ago when we played them. And if you remember, it was their first team playing our under-23s. And I travelled down for that game. And we got beat 4-1. But Sorensen played. And I've got to be honest, I wasn't impressed at all. And if you can't impress against a team like Sunderland, I know it's an under-23s against the first team, but that was the game where he should have been able to, to stand up and show, look, I'm here and this is what I'm going to do, And I think if he'd made a good impression in that game, maybe he would have been, maybe he would have led to something a bit more. But I don't know. We seem to have had a history of it in my time as a Newcastle fan of young players being bigged up, and this is where Paul's coming from. I can think back to Paul Brayson, great player, non-league, by the way. Good mate of mine, didn't quite make it at the top level. Michael Chopra, probably another one who's been on the show many, many times, who didn't quite do it in the Premier League, but he had a good career elsewhere, but just struggled in the top flight. And there's been many, many more players who've been got off to a great start in the reserves and didn't quite make it. And as we've seen, Liverpool probably is the one club where you look at and think, Man United to an extent as well with their class of '92, Newcastle with their class of '92, Howie Watson, Elliott, Alan Thompson, all of those guys who came through. But at the other end, you had Liverpool strikers. I'm talking about Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler, both coming through and both having fantastic careers. But I remember, I think Owen must have been about 17 when he made his debut, and you could just tell he oozed class. The goal he scored against Argentina, he probably was only 18 or something, 19 for England. If you're good enough, you'll come through. Alan Shearer, going back decades now, but when he made his debut against Southampton against Arsenal and scored a hat-trick. Again, I think he was about 18. If you're going to be a player and you're going to do well at that level and you're going to be some kind of legend, then that's what you need to do. You need to make a bang. It's no good just coming in and, having a few nice touches. Armstrong and Ivan Toney are getting mentioned about Newcastle's, coming back to Newcastle. Toney, I don't think will come. I wouldn't be surprised if Adam Armstrong landed at Newcastle if we didn't get taken over. But are they good enough? Are they players who are going to get you 20 goals a season? I don't think so. Not in the Premier League anyway. But I get the point. It's all about opinions. PD Proudlock says, Castore new sponsors. I'm delighted a change was needed. I haven't seen it announced properly yet, but obviously I've seen a bit of stuff on the internet about it and saying that there's going to be some kind of announcement soon. Ian Gaskell says, Shiro's in shocking form before Euro 96. Look what happened. He won the Golden Boot. A fair point. A fully backed Rafa would be a very different animal to the one we saw under the miser Ashley. I think a lot of people think that. Jimmy says, Holly, if the takeover goes through and say we do not get Rafa, who would you like to be the manager at Newcastle? I've got a few of my own, but I just want to know who you would want, Holly and Steve.
Pochettino is someone that I would like to see at the club. I think I've said that from the offset. My only worry is now he's been out of a job for longer than I think he should have been out of a job. So maybe he wouldn't hit the heights that he managed to reach with Tottenham. Because I did think he did an absolutely outstanding job with Tottenham. And then I think it was unfair that he got sacked. So maybe not him anymore. Of course, there is Frank Lampard as well. That's quite a controversial one. But I think maybe he could be quite good. I don't see why people wouldn't be willing to give him a chance. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't manage to get a job sooner rather than later. But I would probably be willing to take the risk with Frank Lampard again. I think he did excellently with Chelsea and then was unfairly sacked, which is the case with a lot of managers. I think clubs are far too quick these days to just sack a manager when a few things go wrong, because in their eyes they're like, well, listen, I've given you this amount of money and you haven't done what you wanted to. But it takes time. You can't just expect results overnight. But Pochettino and Frank Lampard are probably the two that I would put highly up in my list.
I'm not a fan of Pochettino, I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't want Eddie Howe, which he keeps getting linked. I've always fancied Mourinho at St James's Park. I think he would be a perfect fit, especially with his connecting with Bobby Robson. So I've got to be honest, if we got if we got the money men in at St James's Park and it was the takeover that we're hoping is going to go through, I'd love to see them break the bank to get Mourinho, because contracts aren't worth aren't worth the paper they're written on. So I'd like to see Mourinho win if I'm going to be able to pick anybody. Hans says, who's impressed you most at the Euros so far? I presume he means teams, not England, Hans. That's for certain. I love Belgium. I've got to be honest though, Italy become my favourites. They look really, really good. 30 games unbeaten. And wow, I mean, just the manager oozes confidence and cool at the same time, doesn't he? But I think Italy for me. Holly, what about you?
At the start of the competition, France was my favourites, but after watching all of the sides, I've got to agree with you. I think it's going to be Italy. I saw a lot of people bigging up Italy before the competition, and I wasn't quite convinced. I mean, I know they've been doing well and they're an excellent side, but I didn't think they would be as good as they have been. And that manager, I watched an interview of him and I just thought, wow, it was just like, he just looked on top of the world, like no one was better than Italy. And I think that mentality is reflected throughout the whole squad. And if you feel unbeatable, most times you are, because I think mentality is a massive thing in football. So, and the amount of games that went unbeaten, I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. So I wouldn't be surprised if they can make it all the way and win the competition.
Yeah, going to be interesting. Certainly going to be interesting next couple of weeks. Chris McCarthy saying there, talking about Shopra, Steve, he's gone over quiet after he broke that bluff story from the Nova Group saying Ronaldo was our first target. Have you heard from Shopra, Steve? Yeah, I've. Needless to say, he didn't want to come back on. And I think, look, I like Michael. I think he got sucked in by the whole thing. And I met him in Newcastle when he broke the story. I saw some of the paperwork. It did look very genuine, but what on earth happened there, I really don't know. And I'm sure he'll come back on the show at some point. It's just the whole thing was a little bit embarrassing. And listen, he'll not be the first person, not be the last to to come up with some kind of potential takeover, but for it to go west. And the series of programmes that I'm working on with Steve Hasty and Neil Mitchell and Keith Patterson will certainly open your eyes to a lot of things that have gone on over the last 25 years at Newcastle United, both on and off the pitch and away from takeovers and involving takeovers. So I'm sure you will you'll enjoy that in due course. They'll be coming out very, very soon. We've recorded 2 so far. Simeone in if Rafa is out the picture, says Trolls. What about Zidane, says Mark Cooper. Conte, says Derek Sharp. Isn't Poch at PSG now? Yes, Hans, that's correct. If takeover happens, why not Pep, says Gary Milken. Lots of names there, Holly. Any of them float your boat?
I didn't actually realise Poch had went to PSG, to be honest. I don't follow much football outside of England, but I should probably start doing that. Pep, yes, I'd love to see Pep, but I don't think he'd leave Man City for Newcastle. I think he's quite happy there. He's done really well there. The fans like him, so I don't see any reason why I'd want to go. Apart from them, not really. Not any of the other names mentioned I would really give a shout personally, but there's some good suggestions there, and I'm sure whoever we get in is going to be someone good, because I think the PIF will know what they're doing and they're not just going to bring in any old idiot. I think they'll bring in someone that they know can do well.
Mancini, says Keith Longworth. A lot of people saying Mancini. Darren Cowan as well. Paul says, would you pay £100 for a new Newcastle shirt? The new sponsors are doing a shirt that's over £100. That's absolutely disgraceful. I stopped buying shirts under the Mike Ashley era. When we went for a payday loan deal company on the front, they were getting chatty anyway, but when they put that on the front, I refused to wear it, and I haven't bought one since. And I buy retro shirts probably if I do buy them to go on holiday. What about you, Holly? Would you buy a shirt for £100? I certainly wouldn't.
£100, no, I think that's ridiculous. I think £65 that they charge now is ridiculous. I think it should be no more than like £35 to £40. Really, it's just silly because most fans can't really afford that, but just a top. It's literally a sports top that if it didn't have the crest on, you could probably get for like 20 quid. So they're just absolutely taking the mick and ripping off fans, which they've done for years. I do tend to buy retros more now, and I get a lot of like actual authentic shirts from the 90s and stuff on eBay and things like that. But I buy shirts less and less. I normally buy them when they're half price because I just think they're getting beyond a joke now, and it's just becoming just a greed thing. It's no longer a realistic thing for a fan to be able to buy the shirts every season.
So Bobby, good evening. He says, I know someone who says they'll become a Mackham if Mourinho gets the job. He dislikes him that much. I really, really don't get that. Paul Oxley says Dave Bassett always gets a suggestion. Gary, I did see your point about Hartlepool, but we did touch on Hartlepool a bit earlier, mate. So I'll skip that one. But he says, hi, Holly and Steve. What will happen if Ronaldo takes on the NUFC manager's role? Then how will everyone cope? Which I can't see. See Ronaldo taking over the manager's role. I couldn't see that at all. Really, I've got to be honest. Chris goes, Chopra could go on the Bird's Eye advert. Pure waffle. He's not that. Listen, poor Michael. Leave him alone. He, everyone can make mistakes, and it certainly was a big one. Man City don't sell out, says Gary. I'm not sure where that conversation's come from. And a lot of people talking about Cheick Tiot, and I had already got it lined up to talk about last, but seeing as though everyone's mentioning it in the chat, I will. Pay our respects to Cheick Tiot. He would have been 35 today. Sadly taken from us far, far too soon. He was a hell of a player, and somebody again who maybe he didn't quite fit in at the start, but once he got his feet under the table, he was superb, and obviously going to pay our respects to him. Can you remember anything of him, Holly? Is it a player that you managed to catch a glimpse of or see?
Yeah, he was. I think the game that stands out most for me was the 4-4 with Arsenal when he scored, and then there was that whole boom, boom, shake the tune thing on, like, from the commentator. I think that's what sticks out in my mind the most. But he was a great player. Obviously taken from us far too soon, and it's really, really awful. But I think the legacy that he's managed to leave behind at the club is certainly one that he would appreciate a lot, and I think it shows how much of an impact he did have at Newcastle. But I think even now he probably would have still been involved with the game at some level, even if he was just playing like lower leagues or in the Scottish League or wherever. But he was a brilliant, brilliant player, and obviously sadly missed still to this day at the club.
Yeah, but for me, that was great. I remember the goal he had chalked off against Man City as well, which again, was chalked off. I think was for an offside. Absolutely crazy, but that was fantastic. Lots of people paying the respects to Tiot, and rightly so. Lots of people coming in with some suggestions for manager if the takeover goes through. We've had this before. Bielsa says Captain Clifford. Lampard says Keith Longworth. Geordie Jedi says Frank Lampard. I did see some absolutely hilarious ones. Here we go. Stu says Billy the Fish for the Newcastle job. Billy the Fish was a character in Viz. Holly, I'm not sure if you've ever seen Viz, but basically it was a half man, half fish who used to play in goal. They are going to get worse as well. Allegri, says Paul Jones. That is a sensible one. Roy Race again for Newcastle United job. Roy was all right actually. He could probably still play. Kenny Ranson says Heaton Stanton was non-league and I used to follow. Not sure if they are still going. Yes, they are still going. And I was down in South Shields, Kenny. Your South Shields mag, I think, on Twitter. I was down there at the weekend. It was great to be down there and catch up with a few people. Tom Lynch says, to be fair to Michael Chopra, another former Newcastle United striker named Michael has been up to more embarrassing antics according to yesterday's papers. Now, I haven't seen that. I've got a feeling it was Michael Owen because I did see a few things about Michael Owen kicking around, but completely missed it. I wasn't on social media. I don't do Twitter a great deal apart from when I'm promoting stuff. So I completely missed that. So probably best to avoid the conversation about it in case we get sued. Tom Dixon says the goal he scored against Arsenal was a good player. Rest in peace, Tiot. Derek says, my late dad played for Gateshead in the 50s, so I always look out for them. John says, Conte would be interesting. And Dunno says, Tiot legend, rest in peace. England then, final game. Holly, how do you see it going? Because We haven't knocked any houses down in the first 2 games. How do you see this one going?
Considering they could beat Scotland 2-0 and considering how much we struggled to break Scotland down, that does worry us slightly. I think before that Scotland game, I was predicting an easy win. I'll still predict us for a win. I'll go for a 1-0 win to England, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's gave us a massive it's humbled us a lot, because I think so many people after that game, they were like, oh, we're going to go on to be absolute world beaters, predicting 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, and I think we can now realise that probably isn't going to happen. And we probably aren't going to get as far in the competition as we thought we're going to, but I still think we can win this. I still think we'll comfortably make it out of the group stages, but I'll go for a 1-0 to England. What do you think?
I've got to be honest. I think they're gonna struggle. After watching what I've watched in the first 2 games, the Czechs they're not an easy team to beat, and if we don't get our goal scoring boots on, we could really struggle. I'm going to go for a draw tomorrow. I've just got a feeling we're going to cock things up. I hope I'm completely wrong, and I hope they've had a rocket up their backside, which they should have done. But I really worry for them. What about Scotland? Do you think Scotland are going to continue?
I think Croatia is not a bad team. I don't think they're half the team that they were in 2018 in the World Cup. But to be honest, I could see Scotland managing to get a win. It just depends if they can get someone that will score a goal, because they've scored no goals so far in the competition. But I wouldn't be surprised if Scotland went on to win that game and could make it out the group stages. Listen, I want them to. It would be brilliant if both Scotland and England could make it onto the next stage. But I can't see Scotland managing to score, but I'd love to see them do it, and I'll back them for a 1-0 win as well, same as England. I just hope they can. But Croatia, I was thinking that they were going to be way better than they were, but they actually weren't. So, and I must be honest, I've literally, after that England-Scotland game, I was just like, how long is it till pre-season friendlies? Like, I just started to lose all interest in I mean, I've been back in Slovakia a lot as well, because I've been watching all their games just because of Martin Dubravka, because he's my favourite Newcastle player. I've been watching all their games and getting more interested in that than England half the time, to be honest. But literally, I was just like, oh, I can't wait for the pre-season friendly, starting to lose a bit of interest. I'm quite fickle when it comes to England, I will admit. I do lose interest quite quickly.
Les Bates, who we're having a bit banter with on Twitter before, he says, come on, Holly, cheer on the Scots.
He said, if we make it out of the group stages, you have to wear a Scotland shirt. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing it. Sorry, Les.
I've got to be honest, Scottish fans seem to have more fun than England fans. Yeah. That's for certain. Win, lose or draw, they go for the party. They always seem to have a great time. So Mark Cooper says, without Gilmore, who ran the Scotland midfield, I think Scotland will lose 2-0. Yano says, take over, then appoint Gian Gasparini. And Tom just says, great show tonight, Steve and Holly. Thank you very much. As I say, tomorrow night I am back with Liam Kennedy at 6 o'clock. And on Wednesday night, it is the Retro Show with the guys. And Thursday night, Super Mac and Gibbo. And then it's the Fab Four on Friday. Holly, as always, great show. That hour's flown over. And I look forward to seeing you again next Monday. Have a good week, Holly. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn.